arrogant father humiliated his blind son's friendship. With a waitress's child, what happened next stunned the hall. This is the story of a night that was supposed to be filled with music, crystal lights, and laughter, but instead, it became a stage for cruelty. A blind boy stood inside a hall so grand it could swallow entire streets. He clutched the hand of his only friend, a poor waitress's child. Their bond was simple, innocent, but that innocence was about to be shattered, because arrogance does not forgive what it cannot understand. The boy's father, dressed in wealth and pride, didn't see the value of friendship. He saw shame. He saw dirt creeping too close to the polished shoes of power. And when the moment came, when his cruelty broke in front of the entire hall, it left scars so deep the night itself seemed to hold its breath. What happened next would silence the music forever. The mansion of Charles Duval was not a home. It was a kingdom. Perched above the city on a hill lined with iron gates and marble statues, it overlooked ordinary lives, like an emperor surveying peasants. Inside, crystal chandeliers glowed like captive suns, and the floors reflected light, so sharp that it almost cut the eye. Servants moved silently, ghosts in uniforms, carrying trays heavy with silver and glass. And in the middle of all this wealth lived Adrien Duval, 12 years old, fragile, blind. Adrien's eyes had never seen the chandeliers or the diamonds dripping from his father's guests. His world was sound and touch, the shuffle of footsteps, the clinking of forks, the warm brush of sunlight on his cheek. What he couldn't see, he painted in his imagination. But there was one thing Adrien longed for, more than gold or light, a friend, and he had found one, though his father would never approve. Her name was Lila. She was the daughter of a hotel waitress, a girl with braids pulled tight and a face too often flushed by work. She wasn't dressed in silks or jewels. She didn't belong in Charles Duval's hall, but she belonged in Adrien's heart. The two met in secret corners, in the garden where roses bloomed behind high stone walls, in the servants' corridor where laughter echoed off empty trays. Adrien listened to her stories of street markets, of music played on cracked radios, of colors he could not see but could imagine through her words. To Lila, Adrien wasn't the heir of a mansion. He wasn't the boy of polished shoes and guarded doors. He was just a child, fragile and curious, who laughed when she laughed and trusted her more than anyone else. But shadows always found them, the whispers of servants, the cold stares of Charles Duval, the subtle humiliations that slid across the marble floor like knives. Charles had tolerated too much already. A blind son, a fragile name. He would not tolerate him lowering himself to the daughter of a servant. And yet Adrien didn't know that this week would be the last time life felt almost normal, because something was coming. Something that would make his friendship with Lila a crime. The night of the grand banquet arrived. Every chandelier was lit. Every glass was filled. The hall pulsed with the sound of violins and the murmur of men whose fortunes shaped cities. Women draped in silk whispered behind jeweled hands, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Servants moved quickly, carrying golden platters of food, and among them was Lila's mother, her shoulders bent, her face invisible to the world that used her hands, but never her name. Adrien sat near the stage, dressed in a black suit tailored to perfection. His father stood tall beside him, shaking hands, receiving compliments. To the world, Charles Duval was a man of pride. To Adrien, he was a wall of silence. But when Lila slipped quietly into the hall, carrying a small tray of glasses, Adrien's face turned toward her. He couldn't see her, but he felt her. The warmth of her presence cut through the coldest room. She passed near him, and their hands brushed. Adrien smiled, whispered her name under his breath, a fragile secret in the noise. But secrets cannot hide forever, one guest noticed, then another. Eyes shifted. Whispers stirred like a storm building. Is that the waitress's child? Look, with the blind boy. How disgraceful. Charles Duval followed their stares. His jaw tightened. His glass froze in his hand. Adrien leaned toward Lila, asking softly if she could stay, just for a moment, to describe the hall to him. She began to whisper about the golden chandeliers, the dresses, the colors dancing like fire across the room. And in that fragile moment of friendship, Charles struck. He seized his son's arm, pulling him away. The tray in Lila's hand rattled, glasses trembling. A hush fell over the room. Enough. Charles's voice cut through the air. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words were heavy enough to break bones. The guests leaned in, hungry. Charles demanded to know what business a servant's child had standing beside his son. He called it humiliation, a disgrace. Lila's lips trembled. Adrien's face turned pale. He reached for her hand, but Charles shoved it away. Laughter burst from the tables. Cruel, mocking, a circle of power feeding on the weakness of a child. Some pointed, some smiled, some whispered so loudly it was meant to wound. Adrian couldn't see their faces, but he could hear it all. Every laugh was a knife, every whisper, a stone. He clung to his father's sleeve, begging him to stop, but Charles did not stop. He pushed Lila back toward the servants, her tray shaking in her hands. He declared that his son was not to be touched by the likes of her, that his bloodline would not be dragged down into the dirt. The guests clapped, actually clapped, their rings flashing as their hands struck together, praising his cruelty like a performance. And Adrian broke. He stumbled forward, his small hands stretched out, searching for the one person who gave him light. His father held him back, his grip like iron. Why? Adrian's voice cracked the silence, but Charles only turned away. The violins kept playing, but the music sounded hollow now. And then, the silence grew darker, because Adrian was about to do something no one expected. Adrian stood still, his blind eyes stared into nothing, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The hall laughed around him, his father's pride filled the air like smoke, but in Adrian's chest, something stronger than shame was burning. He reached for the piano, the great black piano that sat near the stage, untouched, gleaming under the chandelier's light. His small hand slid across its surface, finding the keys. The room chuckled. A blind boy at a piano, a servant's daughter still trembling near the wall. To them, it was comedy. But then, Adrian played. The first note cracked the air like lightning, then another, then a storm of sound. His fingers, guided not by sight but by memory and heart, danced across the keys. The hall froze. Conversations died. Forks stilled. Glasses lowered. Music poured out of him. Not practiced, not rehearsed, but raw, furious, beautiful. It carried pain. It carried shame. It carried love for the only friend who had ever made him feel whole. Every note was a scream. Every chord was a wound. The chandeliers trembled with the force of it, and the marble floor seemed to carry the sound like a heartbeat. Lila's tears fell silently. She watched as Adrian poured his soul into the piano, his face lifted, his blind eyes wet but unbroken. Guests were silent now, their laughter drowned, their arrogance crushed. Charles Duval stood frozen. The man who thought he controlled every room found himself powerless in front of his blind son's truth. When the final note fell, it was not music that remained. It was silence, heavy, eternal. No one clapped, no one laughed. They couldn't, because they had been stripped bare. Adrian stood from the piano, his small body trembling, his face wet with tears, but there was no shame left in him, only truth. He turned toward the place where he knew Lila stood. His hand reached out, trembling but strong. She ran to him, no longer afraid, and held it tightly. The room watched, silent, broken. Charles tried to speak, but no words came. For the first time in his life, pride failed him. Adrian and Lila walked together through the hall, past the tables of gold and silk, past the faces that had laughed at them minutes before, past the chandeliers that now felt dim, no matter how bright they shone. The boy who could not see had shown them all what blindness truly was. Outside the mansion, the night air was cool, free. Adrian breathed deeply, the weight of the hall falling away. Lila's hand was still in his, steady and strong. That night the guests would never forget what they had seen. Some would tell the story in whispers, ashamed. Others would bury it in silence, afraid of what it revealed. But none could erase it, because the blind boy had shown them a truth money could not buy. That friendship is not dirt, that love is not humiliation. And when history remembers that night, it will not remember the chandeliers, the food, or the wealth. It will remember the sound of a boy's music and the silence it carved into every arrogant heart. So ask yourself, if cruelty can silence a child, but a child's truth can silence an entire hall, then what does it say about us when we choose to laugh instead of listen?